How's everyone doing? Good evening. Good afternoon. Right. I don't even know where I am. I've been to so many stops. Campaign this afternoon. It's great to be with you. Put this on the chair this afternoon. Oh, that's better. So here's the deal, everyone. Charlie Baker knows he's going to lose this race. You know how I know? Because he's got a tracker filming me everywhere I go. I have a tracker from the Republican State Committee. Give him a round of applause. How do you know? How do you know we're going to win this race, right? Look, on a serious note, I do want to tell you why I made the decision to run and what drove me into the race. I do want to just acknowledge as we move into Martin Luther King Day weekend, what the significance of this moment really is. I think about some of the vile comments that are coming out of our Oval Office in Washington. And I think about Martin Luther King's last year alive. A few months before he was assassinated, we're coming up on the 50-year anniversary. He made a speech that was entitled, "Where do we go from here?" A lot of folks don't know, when Martin Luther King approached his death, he was focused on one issue: economic inequality, economic justice. He acknowledged the progress that we had made, getting rid of Jim Crow, putting in place Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act. But he said something that I think was quite profound that really applies to where we are right now. He said we should never accept the status quo. And we can do something about it if we work together and deal with economic justice. I think about Dr. King as we go through this weekend and what's happened in the last year, our president, what he has said. We shouldn't just pay attention to the vile things he is saying. Yes, we should never normalize, but we also must pay attention to the policies he is promoting in Washington and the policies that are being promoted right here in Massachusetts. Well, this leads me to why I decided. There are three things in my background that drove me into this race. One, my time in the military. I enlisted in the Navy a little bit after 9/11 because America was under attack. I'm a third-generation combat vet. Second, my 8 years as mayor of the city of Newton, working for the 88,000 people of Newton, Massachusetts every single day. And the third is my family. I'm a father, I'm a husband, 2 children, 9 and 6, and I know where I came from. About 10 years ago, this fall, I got a call from my commanding officer in the Navy Reserves, and he said, "You're going to Iraq for 1 year deployment." Around that same time, my wife Tassie informed me that she was pregnant with our first child. So what they do with these deployments, they give you 2 weeks of R&R. You get to come home for 2 weeks, and then you have to go back. The first day I got home from my R&R, my daughter was born. So I spent 2 weeks with Tassie, my newborn baby daughter Abigail. And then I had to go back to finish my tour duty. It was one of the toughest things I ever had to do. 2 things I took from that deployment that has stuck with me. Number one, an appreciation of the men and women that do multiple deployments. I only done one. Some of them come home injured. Some of them don't come home at all. The second was being on that base, living, working, people in certain circumstances that had nothing in common. People of different races, religions, backgrounds, political persuasions. We couldn't afford not to work together to get through that year. That stuck. When I got home in the fall of 2008 to raise my family, I made another decision, and that was to run for mayor of my hometown, Newton, Massachusetts. At the time, Newton faced a $40 million projected structural deficit, no rainy day or reserve fund, 2 of the worst conditioned school buildings in the state of Massachusetts, 1 AAA bond rating that was in danger of being done. So, decided to run. A lot of smart political people told me, "Don't run, you can't win." I'd never been in political office before. I I worked in the Clinton administration, White House staffer, worked in the Office of Cabinet Affairs, among others. Ran FEMA for New England. Worked for Senator Kerry for 4 years. I was his point person for small business and economic development, but I had never been in political office before. Me and my campaign knocked on 11,000 doors, and we won that election by 469 votes. In the 8 years since I've been mayor, we've eliminated a $40 million structural deficit. We've grown a rainy day fund that didn't exist to $22 million. We're building 5 new schools in the next 6 years, 3 of which are completed, the next being constructed right now. We've got 2 AAA bond ratings in the city of Phoenix. We're building a road, sidewalks, fire stations, and reinstating public safety officials that we lost before we became here. Point to 2 reasons that's how we got it. First, every single one of those budgets that I passed with my 24-member city council were based on outcomes for people, the people of my community. We found savings and efficiencies not by hurting the residents of Newton, but enhancing them. One of those places was through the promotion of solar and the reduction of energy consumption. We have cut our carbon footprint in half as municipalities, the city government, in the 8 years since I've been mayor. And we're going to save $40 million for the next 20 years because of what we've done around the promotion of solar and environmental sustainability. Second, I wasn't afraid to raise revenue at the city level. Both of these principles must apply to these budgets coming out of Beacon Hill. Every single one of those dollars coming out of Beacon Hill need to be based on outcomes for people, the people of the Commonwealth, and we can't be afraid to raise revenue at the state level. A year ago, I made another decision, and that was not to run for mayor of Newton for the third term. I've loved being the mayor, done a lot of great work to turn Newton around, but as I started to move around our state, it became very clear that people and communities are falling behind. I believe the defining issue of our time is economic inequality. And when I think about this issue of economic inequality, I think about my own family. Neither one of my parents grew up with wealth. They're from New York. Dad's from Harlem, mom's from the Bronx. My dad grew up in a neighborhood in Harlem that was deemed the worst block in America at the time by CBS News because of the drugs, gangs, and violence. He got out of that life by joining the military. Went to Korea, came home, met my mom. They went down south to college, historically black college, North Carolina A&T. Took them several years to finish school, worked their way through, sat at lunch counters and movie theaters to desegregate the South. And my dad found Newton, Mass because he was looking for higher ed. And he purchased the home where I grew up with my 2 sisters and where I live today with my wife and 2 children, 9 and 6, with GI Bill benefits. GI Bill benefits. This is a government-sponsored program, an investment for people of modest means so they can make ends meet and ensure their kids can do better than they did. That is not happening in the Commonwealth today, and it is wrong. It's bad economics, very bad for the economy. But there is a moral question attached to it. And this is what I'm asking everyone in every city and town I go to ask themselves. What kind of Commonwealth do we want to be? What kind of Commonwealth do we want to be? Are we okay with a booming economy happening in and around the greater Boston area, relatively low unemployment rate, but yet at the same time, people are making choices between paying for a copay and going to the doctor or paying for the rent or mortgage? People are making choices between paying for prescription drugs they need for themselves or their family members, or putting food on the table. People are being crushed by student debt, can't afford to attain the credential or degree they need to make ends meet in this economy. I don't believe this is okay. I believe this is wrong. I believe we can do better. That's why I put forth 2 proposals when I announced for governor, among many, one of which is putting in place a single-payer healthcare system in our state now. So that people, yes, so that people can access affordable healthcare. The second proposal I put out there when I announced for governor, among many, was putting in place free public college, lifelong, with paid apprenticeships and internships included. So that people can attain the credential or degree they need to make ends meet in this economy. We can't even get to my proposals unless we deal with these budgets coming out of Beacon Hill. Just a few months ago, Standard & Poor's downgraded the bond rating of the state of Massachusetts for the first time in 30 years. And they cited in their report, this is not me talking, this is the report, the games and gimmicks being played by Governor Charlie Baker to keep these budgets afloat. There are real consequences to the games and gimmicks Charlie Baker's playing with these budgets. Just this past year, to close a $500 million deficit, Charlie Baker cut education funding, Charlie Baker cut transportation funding, Charlie Baker cut subsidies for affordable housing, Charlie Baker cut opioid addiction treatment funding. And to close an $800 million deficit, Charlie Baker proposed removing 140,000 people off of Mass Health, our system of Medicaid here in the state of Massachusetts. So it'll be more expensive for a lot of people to afford health care. This is wrong. It is backwards. We got to look at every single dollar coming out of the state budget. We got to make sure they are driven by outcomes for the people of the Commonwealth. We got to find savings in places like closing tax loopholes and tax exemptions that give away billions of dollars to special interests, have nothing to do with addressing economic inequality in the state. And we can't be afraid to raise revenue at the state level. That's why I support the Fair Share Tax Amendment or millionaire's tax. It's going to be on the ballot the same time as the governor's race next year. It's asking people making $1 million a year or more to contribute more so we can reinvest it. $20,000 a week, it's asking folks, so we can contribute and invest in education and transportation, all generational investments that will level the playing field for average everyday people here in the state of Massachusetts, just like the GI Bill did for thousands of families like that. Before I wrap up, I want to talk about Donald Trump. Really, hear me out. Hear me out. I'll try to go fast. But this is important because we're talking about who we are as people and who we're going to be, who we want to be. You know, the worst thing Donald Trump has done has made neighbors into enemies. We know we got to push back against any policy that comes out of this White House that is un-American or against Americans. The Muslim ban, we got to push back. Say no. The ban for transgender people to serve in the military, it doesn't make us more safe. It makes us less safe. We got to say no. The proposal to remove 32 million people off of health care, I say no. Anything that is racist or sexist or xenophobic or bigoted, we have to say no. We can never normalize. I've been doing it as a mayor, doing it as a gubernatorial candidate. At the same time, there are people that voted for Donald Trump that did not vote for him for those reasons. There are 7,000 people that voted for Donald Trump in my hometown in Massachusetts. I know many of them. Some of them work at City Hall. I used to see them every day when I was the mayor. Some of them are parents of kids that my kids play with. There are 93 cities and towns that went for Donald Trump in the state of Massachusetts in this last election. Donald Trump got more votes than Charlie Baker did. We have got to reach out to those people. If we're going to address economic inequality, but more importantly, if we're going to leave a world better off for my kids and your kids and our grandkids, we have got to work together. We've got to find a way to be one Commonwealth. And that's what I learned on that basic ground. We couldn't afford not to work with people, live with people that thought differently than we did, came from different parts of the country than we did. We had to work together. And the same applies for us right here in the state of Massachusetts. So look, this is going to be a tough campaign. I'm under no illusions. The only way we're going to win it is through good old-fashioned grassroots politics, reaching out neighbor to neighbor, friend to friend, not saying what we're against, but what we are for, not being afraid to tell the truth about some of these hard, complex issues. If we do that, we will not only change the governor next year, but we will change governance in our state so our Commonwealth lives up to its full potential. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I just take questions, right?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Do I call on people or do you?
You call me.
So I get to get back then. All right. I guess there's many more.
We don't have a lot of time, so excuse that my summary of this, but even I'm asking some more questions. How are we going to do stuff through the legislature when the layout is so conservative and blocks so many bills? I mean, we have so many wonderful bills in the legislature. What can you do to help move some things through?
Two things I would say to you. One, I want to make it clear. I'm a lifelong Democrat. I'm real proud of it. But I'm not afraid to challenge my own party. I'm not afraid to challenge my own party. When I think about this question, I think about my time as mayor. You know, when I ran for mayor, most of the city councilors endorsed my opponent. I had some pretty bold visions about what we should do around schools, and finances, and public safety, and we got it done. But I didn't get it done sitting around in City Hall. I got it done by reaching out to the people I work with. In my first term, I did 70 town halls in my state. I brought people into the process, and I asked them to hold me accountable and the city council accountable to getting done what we needed to make sure that we head in the right direction. I'm going to do the same thing as your governor, as your chief executive. I'm not going to sit around the State House. I'm going to be out here. I'm going to be engaging you. And I'm going to ask you to hold me accountable for putting in place single pay. I'm going to ask you to hold me accountable for making sure we have a K through 12 system that's fully funded. And that also adds to public education, after school enrichment, and summer enrichment in early childhood. I'm going to ask you to hold me accountable for making sure we have a transportation system that gets these cars off the highway and gets people to where they need to go. That's the only way we're going to do this. And I'm going to ask them to hold the legislature accountable. And so we have to have a governor that thinks about governance differently, brings in some new thinking. You know, being a mayor and being accountable to the people I work for every single day is a trait that is needed not only in the nominee, but certainly in the governor's office right now to do what you're talking about. So that's how I think about it. Yes, I apologize if someone spoke to me. Go ahead.
Right, yes. I hear everything that you say,
Yep.
very important, healthcare,
Yep.
public education, transportation.
Yep.
But one thing that we all need, and that's the environment. And there's this constant commitment to 1% for the environment, 1% of the budget,
Yep.
but it's not being met at the moment. Please have your thoughts on that.
I'm glad you brought that up. You know, when I think about the environment, and I think about one of the more insidious challenges we have with climate change, I think about that and economic inequality together. See, I think if we address climate change, we are also addressing a social justice issue. I think they're woven together. I believe that Massachusetts has an opportunity to be a world leader in addressing climate change and eliminating economic inequality. For example, if you think about the opportunities we have around solar and wind and renewable energy technology in your state. One of the things I did as mayor is take advantage of Deval Patrick's solar program he started. And we not only cut our carbon footprint in half as a municipality, but one of the other things I did was I created a community solar share program. Newton has the second highest number of millionaires in the state, but yet 1 in 8 of my residents live at or below the poverty. That's economic inequality. So one of the things we did to address economic inequality was share some of that solar power off municipal property with 900 of our lowest income residents in our city so they get a credit on their energy bill. We should be scaling programs like this up, right? To ensure that people that can't have solar on their roofs can take advantage of the solar program. We should be scaling solar up so that we can create green jobs in underserved communities. we should be scaling up offshore wind. We should be investing in growing renewable energy technologies and climate change resilience technologies. What I would do is invest and grow the Clean Energy Center, something that was started by Deval Patrick. Deval Patrick started the Life Sciences Initiative, and he made sure that Massachusetts was a world leader around life sciences. We should do the same thing around climate change, particularly with Donald Trump and all these other passions. So I believe this is part of answering economic inequality as well as addressing the environment. And by the way, make no mistake, this election is about choices. You got a government that's looking to promote fossil fuels. You know, we should stop building this natural gas infrastructure, these pipelines. I went down to Weymouth recently, Spectrum was trying to site a compressor station there, have natural gas go through Massachusetts up north. And some folks reached out to me and said, I want you to come down. I want you to understand what this is all about. We've been sitting in front of Andrea Honoring. This group of people said, we've been sitting in front of the governor's office for weeks and won't even take a meeting with us. Are you kidding me? I mean, so I went down there and saw it, did the tour. We should absolutely not cite something like that. We should stop building these gas infrastructure pipelines. They make no sense. And we should be listening to people. The governor should be listening to the people he works with. That's what I do as a mayor all the time. When I was mayor, listen to folks. And then make sure we're making the right decisions, not just around the environment, but for the people that we want. So that's how I think about that. Yes. Yes.
Okay. What will you do to expand voting rights, particularly on early voting? Will you allow early voting in every election?
Yes. So, I'm glad you asked that question. There are other states that are further along than we are. Washington State. There's a bunch of states that, but we have to expand the opportunity for people to register to vote, and we also need to provide the resources for cities and towns to do that. So we gotta have a conversation with Secretary of State, and we also have to make sure that the governor and the legislature is providing the resources for early voting, for different access to the ballot than they are now, because we're not. I mean, a lot of city towns are on their own on these elections, and they have to pay for the infrastructure and architecture around it. So I would support that. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
What would you do to specifically fund or reform the state pension system to make sure it's sustainable in the long run?
It's a great question. So when I took over as mayor of the city of Newton, the city had no plan to eliminate its pension liability. It was way out to the future, eliminating the pension liability. And just so you know, this and post-employment health benefits, OPEB and pension, are two liabilities for cities and towns as well as the state that are real issues because they affect our operating budget, right? The more you're paying into both of these every single year, the less money you have to deliver services. So this is the friction between the two. So what I did in Newton is I focused on it for three reasons. Number one, the rating agencies pay very close attention to whether or not cities or towns, or a state for that matter, are making an effort to decrease this liability for pension or eliminate it. Same post-employment health. So what I did, we put together a plan that would eliminate Newton's pension liability by 2030 and our post-employment health liability by 2040. Both very aggressive and sound ways to do it. How did I do it? Very quickly. It all comes down to sustainable budgeting and how you do budgeting. Because all this is a mathematical equation. You got to put a little bit more input towards your liability every single year to eliminate it, and that's what we did. And we scheduled that. Same with post-health benefits as well. We were able to get there because we have something called income-based budgeting. Our budget is very transparent, and I wanted to make sure that we were funding the things we needed to do today, which I did, not just through contracts with our unions, which we did, that were sustainable. And I worked very collaboratively. We have 17 unions in my city, and we put together, all of them were out, actually, or up when I came in. We put together sound, long-range, sustainable contracts that took care of our employees, but also took care of our workers. And second, I wasn't afraid to make targeted increases as far as raising passing that tax over in 2013 for schools, and roads, fire stations, and police officers and teachers. So we were very efficient and sound in how we spent our money. We were driven by outcomes. We were sound, making sure we put sustainable contracts together that took care of our employees, and we were honest about the fact that we needed to raise revenue and make investments that mattered, that were targeted, so that we could get to a point where we had not only one AAA bond rating as it started, but 2 AAA bond ratings. We're doing extraordinary work around investment in infrastructure. We added teachers and police officers. So the bigger picture here, without getting too far into the weeds, for all of us, don't let any Republican Party, right wing, tell you that a progressive cannot be sound with finances. This is a bill of goods that Republicans sell all the time. Somehow someone who is progressive can't govern, can't ensure that we have sustainable financing for our state. I have a track record of doing it in Newton, and I would have a track record of doing it in the state of Massachusetts. Charlie Baker has thrown our budget into chaos. And you know what? He's a right-wing Republican. He bought into, and folks, he's a Republican. Okay? You just put that through your heads. He might be a nice guy, but there are plenty of right-wing Republicans that I don't want to be governor. I mean, Ronald Reagan sold us a bill of goods back in 1980. Very simple. Ronald Reagan said, just get government out of the way, cut taxes for the wealthiest people in the country, and somehow magically it's going to trickle down. Everyone's going to be okay. This thinking has been pervasive in Washington and in state houses across the country, including the Massachusetts State House. And it's still there right now. So we got to tell the truth about the fact that we can govern, we can ensure we take care of pension liability and OPEB liability, but also invest in our people and in the future. That's what I draw out of your question. That's the way I see it. Yes.
I would think to beat Baker, the same coalition that beat Roy Moore needs to come out in this state. How would you bring that coalition out?
So look, everyone says you can do it in Alabama, you can do it in Massachusetts, right? That's the Exactly. That's true. But with all due respect to Alabama, the truth of the matter is, when we turn out here in Massachusetts, we win. When we don't, we lose. I mean, we have a numerical advantage, and we need people to come out. We need direct turnout, and the way we do that is organize like heck on the ground, tell the truth. Just not be afraid to tell the truth, and we can win. I mean, this is going to be a turnout election. Elizabeth Warren, my cousin's on the ballot. So I told Elizabeth, it came from me. She said, where'd that come from? I told Elizabeth the other day we should print the bumper stickers, Warren and Warren. Elizabeth's going to be at the top. She's got a bunch. Warren Healy, great, the best attorney general in the country. Right? And we got these ballot questions. Paid family leave, which I support. $15 minimum wage, which I support. Fair share tax amendment, which I support. These are going to generate us. Get involved, get plugged in to turn people out. If we do that, we will win next year. We will win. Yes.
I don't disagree with your approach about being honest about having to raise revenues,
Yep.
But it feels like a setup for a no new taxes, he's going to raise your taxes type confrontation. And I'm just wondering, how do you counter that?
Yeah, that's what the Baker campaign is planning. You already got
Yeah, I'm not
rock and
a
loaded.
plant or anything.
Are you a mole?
Not at all. I promise you that.
But to your point, I mean, that's
So how are you gonna?
that's the same old Republican playbook. But here's the thing. Charlie Baker announced for his reelection about a month ago. He put out a press release. He cited three things that he's running, that he's proud of. He pointed to his success in transportation. On a serious note, he also talked about his success around opioids, which I want to talk about. And the third thing he said, he was so proud. No new tests. No new tests. Well, let's just take a closer look at that press release for a second. Right? Let's talk about transportation. We've all driven, or not driven. We've all been in real life traffic, right? Correct? We've all driven over roads and bridges that are falling down, right? You've seen it, right? We also know, because the federal data just came out, that our commuter rail service is the worst in the country. This isn't me. This is federal data just came out, and they cited mechanical failures and breakdowns. We're number one. We're worse than New York and New Jersey. They have more cars, they have more tracks, right? So on this transportation thing, I challenged Charlie Baker on this. I said, we need investment. This is wrong. Let me tell you what his answers are. I enjoyed the answers. So coming out of the Baker administration, first was we need to continue privatization. No new revenue, right? Well, first of all, commuter rail is privatized right now. Keolis is running. Second thing he said is, we're making improvements that you can't see. What does that mean? The third thing, it's going to take us 20 years to fix it. Well, my answer is, it's going to take you 20 years to fix it. Get out of the way and let me get in there, so we can make the investments to improve the infrastructure, improve our service. I mean, let's have that conversation. I'm happy to have that conversation. On a serious note, this opioid issue, this is something that is personal for me. Being the mayor a few years ago, I started seeing these overdoses in youth, and I started hearing from people that I knew who had lost someone to opioid addiction. Some people, family members, some people in addiction recovered. And then I started to run for governor. I started to move around our state. I've been to over 150 communities in our state in my campaign for governor. There's not been one setting where someone either publicly or privately comes up to me and says, I've lost someone to addiction, I'm in recovery, I know someone. So I started hearing this everywhere. And then I started to look at the data, the numbers. Deval Patrick, 2014, declared a state of emergency around opioids. We were the first state in the country to do it. Since then, 6,000 people have died of opioid addiction. Over 5 people a day are dying of opioid addiction in the state of Massachusetts. 250,000 people are living with opioid addiction in our state right now. And it's growing at a cost of $10 billion a year to the Commonwealth. Criminal justice costs, health costs. I appreciate what the governor and some of the folks up there at Beacon Hill did in providing additional Narcan, trying to market back the prescribing of drugs. Appreciate that. But folks, it's not enough. The status quo isn't enough. Now, Charlie Baker sits on a opioid panel appointed by Donald Trump and run by Kellyanne Conway. And this group of people under Trump declares a state of emergency around opioids and don't provide the resources. Baker's doing the same thing here in Massachusetts. We need investment. I started a series of town halls and roundtables around this issue. I've been all over the state in the last several weeks. I'm hearing not enough beds in detox. The stays are too short, if they are at all. The waits are too long. I'm hearing if you get out, there's nothing there. We need real investment in community-based, lifelong treatment, wraparound services with families included. So this is a crisis that is not being dealt with. It is cruel to say that you've been successful around opioids. This is a press release. So, but what about your question? His third point is, I'm proud because I haven't raised revenue, no new revenue. I'm happy to have that conversation. I'm happy to have that conversation with anyone. We got to tell the truth about raising revenue, and we got to tell the truth about making investments to address the needs of the people who come. So yeah, they'll run all those commercials, they'll do this, to do that, but folks, let's not cower. Let's, as Deval Patrick used to say, let's grow a backbone here and tell the truth and go right at this and let them do the scare tactics and run all the commercials that they're going to run. But talk about the people, who we are, who we're going to be, what kind of Commonwealth we want to be. That's what this should be about. So bring it on.
Somebody will, I'm sure.
Yes.
Hi. As governor, would you be willing to support conducting basic income experiments in Massachusetts?
I'm sorry?
Basic income experiments? There's some other countries.
Universal basic income.
Heard of that before? Okay, probably be a bit too much to explain.
So this is providing an income?
It's basic income is guaranteed income that's paid out individually to citizens on a regular basis, paid for through taxes. It's basically an income redistribution program, but that also supports people so they can more easily change jobs, so they can more easily go back to school and get education,
I got you.
so that they can start their own businesses.
So I'm familiar, I've seen some discussions around this. I have not embraced that thinking at this moment. However, I believe when you look at economic inequality in our country right now, there's two basic ways to look at this. One, and we all know this, the cost of living, right, in our state has continued to go up. Meanwhile, people's wages basically stayed flat. So that's a cut in your income. Really think about it.
For under 35,
So,
wages have actually
absolutely.
increased by 35%.
So the way I'm going at it, and I'm happy to talk to you after a little bit more about your thinking, but the way I want to go at this is, you look at the drivers based on costs here, and this is evidence in recent days in our state. Healthcare, I talked about single payer at the top of this thing. That is a huge cost driver. While we have 98% of folks have some sort of insurance, and there's some great innovations around healthcare here in the state of Massachusetts. Those are good things. We want to retain those. We are the second highest, most expensive state as far as healthcare costs in the entire country. So people are making these choices. People aren't going to the doctor. You can't afford to. Or taking the medicine. My answer is to not make it more expensive for people to get into a doctor's office or have medical attention that they need, but to actually reduce costs through reducing administrative costs and drug costs. Baker's answer is to make it more expensive, higher copays, lower deductibles. And the same answer is in coming out of DC, Washington. Republicans in DC, same over Republican stuff. On education. I mentioned educational. You can 40 years ago, you could work your way through college, right? You could have a side job. This is in the 1970s and 80s. You could have a side job. You could pay your rent wherever you are. You could pay for food. Go to college. The reason why I support free public college, just like high school, because you can't do that anymore. I mean, I'm meeting students who are homeless. UMass Amherst, UMass Lowell. They're living out of cars because they can't afford. They're paying for food, they're paying for books, they're paying for tuition, and they're being taken on debt. This is where we are, folks. So this is why I say free public college. That's why I talk about it. This is having that honest conversation. Housing and transportation. Talk a little bit about transportation, which I can talk about, but the housing costs are spiraling out of control in the greater Boston area. We need to make sure we're investing and providing housing for people, affordability, and zoning changes to make that possible with good, solid transportation. I want east-west rail. I want north-south railway. I want South Coast rail. I want to make sure that we build good green regional transit authorities that gets the people where they need to go last mile. These are real investments. Transportation is one of the drivers of economic. So, and then on the job side, we've got to make sure we're creating higher paying jobs for people to live. I talked a little bit about how we can do that through climate change and solar and offshore wind, and investing in growing small and mid-sized businesses. This is where we need to go, I believe, to level the playing field. This is not happening on Beacon Hill. It's certainly not happening at this time. Governor's Council?
I have a question to go back to the opioid.
Yep.
I have been lobbying the legislators. You're right, we're not doing enough, the government doesn't do enough about opioids. We have 3 branches of government, and the judicial is only getting 1%. And I believe we only have 3 drug treatment centers. And I think for the women, it's only 1. So what good is it if we have all this legislation for drug addiction and opioids if you don't have a place to bring these people? It's a medical problem. It's not a criminal problem. And so what can you do about that? I mean, we're not getting the funding for the drug treatment centers. How would you change that?
So you mentioned a couple of things there which I think are a target. And thank you for raising this. I want to talk about criminal justice reform just for a quick minute. And this election is about choices. It's always about choices. We need to make sure we're diverting people out of the criminal justice system that have addiction issues, right? We need to have diversion programs so people can get treatment and not put them through our criminal justice system so they're incarcerated. Once people are incarcerated, we need to make sure we have programming and interventions so that people are prepared to come out and re-enter so they go back in. And then once people do re-enter, we need to make sure we have support systems so that they don't go back. There's a great program, UTEP, up in Lowell, that works directly with people that are incarcerated and who are recently have come out. They provide them with job, housing, connections to services that they need. These are the types of investments we need to make. Now, as I said, these elections are about choices. Mandatory minimums. They don't work, right? Evidence-based, we know that. They don't decrease addiction, they don't decrease crime. But yet, Charlie Baker submits a he did submit a deportation bill. We can talk about that in a minute. But he also, this summer, he introduces a bill that would put mandatory minimums in place for nonviolent drug offenders. Just in August. Did you all know that? I mean, we got to get the record out there. So in addition to the additional resources that we need to put towards creating the wraparound community-based services we talked about, we also need to make sure we do criminal justice reform the right way. You know, I've been talking a lot to Pete Shumlin, former governor of Vermont, governor of Vermont, who did a lot of work around addressing opioids up in Vermont. He did a lot of work there. And he's been one of the advisors to my men. He endorsed me for governor in this race. I'm really proud to have his endorsement because he believes that Massachusetts can be a leader in addressing opioid addiction if we really have the political will and we take the best ideas out there. He also believes that we can be a leader in putting in place single-payer healthcare system. They tried to do it up in Vermont, and he said, you know, we learned a lot of lessons that can't get it done. And he told me some of those lessons. But he believes Massachusetts has a real chance to do it better than anyone else in the country. So policies, I think there's an opportunity to lead here, folks, and model, put some things in place that haven't been done around the country. Really do. Can I take, you said 3 minutes? I'm in trouble.
A minute, 2
1 minute.
minutes.
All right, I'll try to just make
And
my
then
answers
15
quick.
minutes after that, and then it'll be.
And then I can walk around.
Then you can walk.
Okay, yes, please.
Hi, I just want, you're putting in place a lot of proposals which are going to take a lot of revenue, when you're talking about, raising revenue. But are there any programs that can actually be cut? In our budget, are there places where we can eliminate some funding that
There are, one of the things that I would tell you that I bring to this race, Beacon Hill for a couple of decades has their budgeting process is broken. It is not transparent and it's not based on outcomes for people. One of the things I said, and really briefly, one of the places we can go to save money is Jay Kaufman. Everyone know Jay Kaufman?
Yeah.
Jay Kaufman for 8 or 9 years has been talking about examining these 400 tax exemptions and making sure there's a third-party commission and there's where we find some of those savings. That's a place I would go right away, and I'd work with Jay to do that. He was a real leader of that. But the other place is the budgeting process. So really quickly, this state needs to do two things, and we did this in Newton. It's been endorsed, one of the things that's been endorsed by Mass Budgeting Policy. First, and I sent a letter to Charlie Baker last March, and here's what I asked. I said, and the Senate President and Speaker DeLeo, here's what I said. Provide a level service maintenance budget, number one. Really simple. All that is tell me how much it costs to fund what the state is doing right now. Really simple. And the second thing I asked was for 5-year revenue projections. Not just 1 year, but 5 years. Why did I ask this question? Because we got to put transparency on this budget. Do you think Baker answered me? Of course he did. But look, the reason why he didn't answer me is because he knows what I know. We're not taking in enough revenue to pay for what we're doing right now, which is why there's a structural deficit. And we should be doing 5-year revenue projections, not just one, because they can do what they did last year. Provide a rosier tax revenue projection. Halfway through the year, it's not as good. Then they go ahead, government makes all these cuts that I talked about in the beginning of the thing. This has been going on for a couple of decades. I want to infuse what this was happening in Newton too. I would say what I did in Newton, I did provide a level service budget first year, did provide 5-year, good sound practices, outcome-based budgeting, put outcomes attached to the dollars, not just a spreadsheet moving money around. And this is where you really get to sort of see where state government's spending money. And I would equip you with this information. Because you go on mass.gov, you're going to see a bunch of lines and numbers. You don't know what, you don't know. And that's the way Baker wants it. So that's how I would approach it, and I would look for this. I'd go after those exemptions. I'd really make sure we were doing the right thing there. How am I doing?
Your public time is up, but you can stay and chat with folks for.
My one ask.
Go for it.
My one ask. This is going to be really short. This is going to be really short. Look.
You got 15 minutes, but they're not.
Really? I don't want to get in trouble here. This is really important. I just want to share this because I was up at UMass Lowell. A student at the end of the session, just like this one stood up. I just want to share this with you. And he said, I think I'm going to support you, but I have a question. So I said, what is it? It's always the young people that stop you all the time. So I said, what's the biggest issue in 2018 for you? And I had to think about it. I said, it's not a policy. It's accepting the status quo and low expectations. And the second is, you can't do anything about it. We must not accept the status quo. We must not accept Charlie Baker's status quo when it comes to addressing opioids. We must not accept Charlie Baker's status quo when it comes to transportation and getting people to where they need to go. We must not accept Charlie Baker's status quo and affordability around healthcare. And we can do something about it. And that's what my campaign is about. So I ask for your help in the next several months. Will's back there, Stephanie's back there. Love for you. We got a clipboard going around. If we organize, tell the truth, we will win. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.